Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's good that we're having this because then we can actually empathize with the rest of Canada, you know?
Round 2, another snowstorm hits the south coast. Also,
there was apparently no fraud going on. It was a little girl trying to open a bank account.
Vancouver's mayor wants to know why a 12-year-old girl and an Indigenous elder were handcuffed at a downtown bank. And
they said, this is the CRA, and your identity has been compromised.
a Burnaby musician duped by an aggressive and elaborate scam.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Well, a brief break from the snow overnight, but not enough to spare some drivers on an icy Highway 1.
And though it held off for most of today, another snowfall warning now blankets Metro Vancouver and Vancouver Island.
Good evening, and with one more day of snow on the way, there are calls tonight for the province to do more to maintain one of Metro Vancouver's most vital thoroughfares during snowstorms.
As Joel Ballard reports, despite the major snowstorm hitting almost 2 days ago, Highway 1 is still being called an ice rink by many drivers tonight.
Semi-trucks stuck and traffic slowly inching along. Just some of the problems caused by icy sections of Highway 1 in Metro Vancouver again today. And it's clear driver frustration about the lack of upkeep is building. Even for the pros hired to clear parking lots, actually getting to the job site has been impossible.
This morning was very rough because of all the rain and then the ice and then the snow on top of it. Some of the conditions were very, very treacherous.
So treacherous, 2 of Schindle's drivers decided the risk wasn't worth it, and they simply got off the highway. A first for Schindle in his 30-year career.
And this is very abnormal conditions for Vancouver. I mean, we get snow, of course we get snow. We get ice, of course we get ice. But when it freezes this hard, it's very difficult to keep up to it.
And it's not just those driving to work having trouble, also those who have to drive for work.
And you can imagine anytime you get behind a heavy commercial vehicle and look out across your hood and see wind and snow and ice, even rain, it certainly gives you concern. And, you know, we rely on roads being maintained to a very high standard.
In BC, highway maintenance is contracted out by the province, and companies must clear the pavement within 24 hours of the storm ending. That window of time has now passed, and roads still icy. Earl says that falls on the contractors and the province.
We want to make sure that the quality assurance processes that are in the contracts are being followed and that are in place, that the evaluations are being done, and that the contractors are being held to the standard that they ascribe to make sure that roadways are safe for passage for everybody.
The Ministry of Transportation says it's doing what it can.
That the maintenance contractor for our lower mainland service areas have been out. All the plows are out. We're salting, we're brining, we're applying abrasives, but there are challenging winter conditions out there.
And he says the humidity in the region means snow is wetter and more prone to freezing. And with more snow on the way, it's a recipe for disaster for drivers trying to slowly hit the road. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
And of course, it's not just highways. Side streets across our region are really seeing the worst of the snow and ice. Calls to 911 regarding slips and falls on ice more than doubled yesterday, totaling 170 in Vancouver. Only major roads, bus routes, and bridges are priority locations for snow and ice removal by the city. So residents are being asked to help keep side streets safe for walkers. That means clearing snow and ice from the full width of sidewalks surrounding your property by 10 a.m. every day. Failure to do so can result in fines.
And as we've mentioned, cleaning any road that isn't a highway is up to local municipalities.
But what if that wasn't the case? What if clearing roads was TransLink's responsibility?
Justin McElroy is live in Vancouver's Mount Pleasant on a very snowy side street. Justin, it seems like TransLink would be an odd choice for snow removal, but it is being suggested by a former Vancouver councillor. Why?
Well, for a simple reason, there's a major road network in Metro Vancouver that TransLink already co-plans and co-maintains with the 21 municipalities in the region, about 675 kilometers worth. They've put over $150 million or so over the last 3 years into helping to maintain it. And the suggestion is, well, considering TransLink already puts that much money in already in an emergency situation like a big snowstorm, perhaps there's some merit, says former Vancouver Councillor George Affleck, of having TransLink make sure that those major routes that thousands of people across the region rely on for commuting are cleared immediately.
I think one of the benefits of what TransLink has to offer is they have a system of operations that will provide clarity and cohesiveness to how you implement any kind of strategy on the main roads. Meanwhile, on the side roads, cities and communities can deal with those. You know, bike routes, for example, in front of schools, routes along side roads that are important, some alleys for trucks. You know, these are things that communities can take care of, and let TransLink and the region take care of the main routes that we see buses on mainly.
Okay, Justin, definitely something that not many of us really think about. So is there any chance of this actually happening?
Yeah, I put it in front of a few Metro Vancouver mayors. They called it interesting and said that there's already a lot of things that we do from a regional perspective. However, in a situation like this, municipalities already have all of these snowplows. Getting TransLink to have their own would cost some as well. Municipalities outside of Vancouver may get worried that all of those snowplows, the major road network, I said 675 kilometers, a lot of those kilometers in Vancouver, whether they would agree of putting so many resources already in this municipality.
All right, Justin, get back inside where it's warm. Thank you.
And a little later in tonight's newscast, an interview with Kevin Desmond, the head of TransLink, about how the weather is affecting transit.
Well, icy streets made it hazardous for firefighters trying to battle a house fire near Pender and Heatley Avenue last night.
And our fire crews are currently all apparatus have chains on right now for these icy road conditions.
The City of Vancouver street crew had to be called in to dump sand on the street so crews could work safely. No one was inside the house when the fire broke out, and crews were able to contain it to one home. The cause of the blaze is under investigation.
And on Vancouver Island, the snow is causing all kinds of problems. In Victoria, heavy snowfall led to flight cancellations at Harbour Air and Victoria Airport. Driving conditions had some businesses closing up shop and sending staff home early. Situation is worse in Nanaimo, where 5 to 10 centimeters has fallen since this morning. Snow led to a 3-vehicle crash after a car slid into an intersection. No one was seriously injured.
They expect parents to get out of their roads to get their kids to school when there's been no plowing done at all.
Schools are open, but slippery sides roads mean many parents are keeping kids home anyway. With nearly the entire island expecting as much as 30 centimeters of snow overnight, there's a good chance for a snow day tomorrow. Highway and municipal crews are out salting roads, trying to prepare for what's to come. Some parts of the island, like Comox Valley, aren't in need of plows yet. There's likely no escape from the next blast of winter, so the usual best advice is, if you don't have to go out, don't.
Well, yesterday's winter storm led to record-breaking electricity use around the province. A shocking 10,302 megawatts of electricity was used on yesterday. That's overtaking the 2-year-old record of 10,194 megawatts set on January 3rd, 2017. All of the extra juice was most likely used for heating during the storm. I know I turned my heat on. And with more chilling temperatures expected and another snowstorm on the way, who knows how long this record will last.
All right, bring in meteorologist Brett Soderholm now. We went through round 1. I guess round 2 on the way, although we kind of saw a little bit of it earlier.
We certainly did. We were dealing with temperatures all across the region that largely was very conducive to this snowfall overall, I would say. We're looking at temperatures right now about -8 all over, and this is going to be the trend for the next few hours at least. Right now, I wanted to give you a picture of what we could be expecting temperatures compared to the rest of the country. Dealing with anywhere between -8 right now. This is actually much colder than we would expect for places places like Toronto that are presently sitting at +3. In terms of some of the record cold that we've seen already, parts of central BC, -48.8 first thing this morning, certainly a record there. And we have plenty of other warnings in effect at this point in time. It is going to be feeling closer to about -45 or even -50 in places like Prince George. And Arctic outflow across parts of the north and central coast could be causing winds to be going up to about 80 kilometers an hour. Now down here, winds as well are going to be a concern, about 70 to 90 kilometers an hour throughout the overnight period. And in addition to that, we certainly have all of this snowfall. So now 10 to 15 centimeters, largely the concern here. And this is going to be happening really into the pre-dawn hours, lasting through tomorrow morning. Now, when I get back, I'll have all of those full and complete forecast details for you, but definitely hold on to those shovels and all of your winter gear.
Will do. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah.
Protesters are showing support tonight for an Indigenous elder and his 12-year-old granddaughter. They were handcuffed by police at a downtown Vancouver BMO last month.
That trauma goes forward for that little girl. Like, I don't know how far it's going to go into her life, but it is. And so we needed to come here today and let that little girl know that the community's behind her, and let the grandfather know the community's behind them, and that this racist behavior must stop.
Dozens gathered at Britannia Community Centre for a healing rally for Maxwell Johnson and his family. Johnson and his granddaughter were handcuffed after trying to open a bank account. Now there are calls for accountability from the bank and from police. The Office of the Police Complaint Commissioner announcing today it will launch an investigation into the incident. And as Eva Yuguen-Senge reports, it's not just activists demanding answers.
Really physically make me feel sick thinking about how the family was treated.
At his first media availability of the year, Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart repeatedly said how badly he felt about the arrest of Maxwell Johnson and his granddaughter.
I feel so badly for what happened to them.
After showing up at a Bank of Montreal branch to open an account in December, Johnson and his 12-year-old granddaughter were detained and handcuffed by Vancouver police officers. Today, the Office of the Police Complaint Commissioner launched an investigation to find out why.
It was in the public interest for there to be a thorough and independent examination into the grounds of the officers to detain and arrest these individuals and the rationale behind using handcuffs in these circumstances.
The Delta Police Department has been tasked with conducting the investigation of the VPD, a concern for some human rights advocates.
Another police force investigating the actions of the VPD, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence that this is a truly independent investigation that will really get to the bottom of what happened.
The mayor says the police board will also be looking into what policies led to the arrest.
On Thursday, we'll begin our policy review to see if at all, any policies had any influence in this specific case, and more importantly, how we can do better.
But the mayor insists the root of the problem is the Bank of Montreal.
Remember, this isn't one rogue employee that's picking up a phone and calling 911. This went through management. There was a review of IDs, there were calls. This was a joint decision by people in the bank, by the Bank of Montreal organization. This isn't accidental.
We have repeatedly asked BMO to comment on the incident. They have so far refused. The investigation by Delta Police will be completed in the next 6 months. If it determines there was misconduct by the arresting officers, they could face disciplinary measures and possibly lose their jobs. Eva Yuguen-Senge, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's College of Naturopaths has suspended the membership of a naturopath who took young autistic patients to Mexico for fecal transplants. CBC News reported Jason Klopp advertises retreats in Mexico where children with autism can receive pills and liquids made from human stool. The treatment costs $15,000 American. The college says he's operating outside the scope of practice in BC by taking patients abroad. BC naturopaths are not permitted to perform fecal transplants for any reason. It is not approved for autism treatment in Canada or in the U.S.
A Burnaby woman who lost $1,500 to a scammer is telling her story tonight. The 32-year-old musician says it's embarrassing to realize you've been fooled.
But as Rafferty Baker explains, she hopes coming forward helps keep other people from falling victim to similar fraud.
This is what they text to me saying, this is where your money will be secure.
Dana McLeod is the latest victim of an elaborate high-pressure scam. It involves claims of identity theft, massive criminal investigations, threat of asset seizure, and ultimately a deposit in a Bitcoin ATM. McLeod makes her living as a musician. When she's not traveling, she lives in Burnaby. That's where the fraudsters phoned her last Tuesday morning.
And they said, this is the CRA, and your identity has been compromised.
What followed was a lie so big, it completely stunned McLeod.
They had found an abandoned blue Honda Civic, rented under my name, with my information. There was 2 addresses connected to this abandoned car. The police raided those addresses and found massive amounts of cocaine and 40 bank accounts registered to my name.
The man on the phone convinced McLeod that she was both the victim of identity theft and the main suspect in the investigation into a serious international criminal enterprise.
My first reaction was that this was an unbelievable story, but I had a credit card compromised about 2 weeks before due to fraud.
The man keeps her on the line. He convinces McLeod not to put him on hold or to speak to anyone else. She's told there's a warrant out for her arrest and police are about to seize her assets as part of the investigation, and that she needs to secure enough money for herself to live off for a little bit, $1,500. She's told to immediately go to her bank and make the withdrawal.
I'm still in my pajamas. I'm barely awake.
McLeod gets the money and the scammer directs her to a nearby convenience store that has a Bitcoin ATM. She's told police and the Canada Revenue Agency use it as a sort of digital security deposit box in cases just like this. She has major doubts, but each step of the way, the man on the phone manages to calm her down and lead her along. That's when she's given the QR code to scan on the Bitcoin machine.
You put the money in the machine and then you get a receipt, it's gone. I mean, it's gone. And there's no way of retrieving it. My stomach was just, it's sick. You feel sick.
Now, Burnaby RCMP say there's little hope of recovering McLeod's $1,500. A corporal told CBC News that scammers are increasingly using what's called phone spoofing to fake the number they're calling from when, in fact, they're probably overseas somewhere. Police say that if anyone says they're calling from the Canada Revenue Agency, hang up and call them back, and that police investigators nor the CRA would ever direct anybody to use Bitcoin or any other kind of cryptocurrency. That's a massive red flag. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Chilliwack fraudster targeting vulnerable seniors is facing dozens of charges tonight. Donald Robert Quinnell was arrested in September on an unrelated Canada-wide warrant, but he has now been charged with 39 counts of theft and fraud across the Lower Mainland, dating back to July. He gained the trust of elderly victims and then stole their wallets, purses, and other valuables. He would then commit fraud with the stolen credit cards.
A WestJet plane bound for Victoria had to land in Vancouver today after hitting a flock of geese in the air. Flight 209 coming from Calgary reported hitting the birds while heading to Victoria. The airline says Vancouver has more maintenance resources, so it made sense to divert there. The plane landed safely and has been taken out of service for safety inspections. WestJet says the 31 passengers on board were being put on the next available flights. And tourists visiting Squamish are in for a treat this Valentine's Day. The vandalized Sea to Sky Gondola is reopening on February 14th. 6 months ago, a cut to the gondola's main cable caused millions of dollars in damage. It took a delivery of a 4.4 kilometer cable from Switzerland in October and 30 new cars to get the attraction back online. The reopening is earlier than expected. The repairs cost between $5 and $10 million. Every year, the gondola carries 400,000 visitors up the mountainside above Howe Sound. As for the vandal, no suspects have been arrested, and the criminal investigation is ongoing.
Well, as much of a negative impact as the winter weather has had, it's not putting a total freeze on fun. A lot of people taking advantage of weather we rarely get in Metro Vancouver.
This was posted by a Reddit user. It was -10 in Pitt Meadows. Says he's always wanted to throw up water and see if it froze, so he threw up boiling water and it did freeze. Says he flinched at the end because some of the water didn't actually evaporate right away. We got to try this.
We should, really. Even with boiling water. And these photos come to us from our producer, Angela Dufresne, a small backyard ice rink labored over by one of her sons.
Wow.
Sadly, though, it has since developed a crack. Yes. Good thing it's going to be cold. Maybe they can get some more water on there, fix it up, and get a few more good days of use.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And this was tweeted out this afternoon. Someone shoveling snow with a chair. Brilliant or silly? What do you think?
I
Let us
love
know.
it.
Do you? I guess he
like-
didn't have a shovel. He was desperate. Sure.
It's working. I mean,
Is
what
it?
the heck? Yeah,
I
I've
guess
used.
that little pat.
It's a Vancouver thing, right? You know.
I don't know if it
We'll
is
get
working. I
mocked.
think that clear patch is from the neighbor, and this guy. This guy still has a lot of sidewalk to.
I had the right idea. We've all used silly things, hockey sticks,
Tell us more,
brooms
Mike.
and stuff like that. That's enough. Yes.
All right, a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs.
And CBC Vancouver's on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And here is a live shot from North Vancouver tonight. That is where 1 week after a commercial plane was shot down, people are gathering for a vigil to remember the victims of Ukrainian Airlines Flight 752. We will take you there live next.
Thanks for joining us online, where we are ad-free during the regularly scheduled TV commercial break.
Well, with the freezing temperatures, you'll probably have the need to melt some ice on the streets, the sidewalk, your driveway. But what do you do if you're out of road salt?
Don't you just use table salt?
That's a suggestion.
In order to find out which home remedies are best in a pinch, Leanne Young and Science World educator Sam Marriott put road salt up against some recommendations.
Okay, so we got an hour. There's slippery ice. Yeah.
No tread on my shoes.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Table salt.
I'm wiggling my feet around and they're staying
Way
in
more
place.
grippy, yeah.
Yeah, lots
Way
of
more
grip,
grippy.
lots of traction on there. This is
Road
the
salt.
road salt. If we look at it, we can see that there's lots of sort of pits where the road salt has melted through.
Now to our fertilizer.
Again, it's really easy to see all of the pits where the fertilizer has been melting through the ice. Could work in a pinch. I wouldn't recommend applying a lot of it because of the environmental side effects that could happen, but let's try the vinegar because it also, it's not done much to change the texture on the surface. Yeah, it is really slippery.
In fact, it feels more slippery than regular
Oh gosh.
ice. I got some
Yeah.
kitty litter.
Yeah. Well, look at that.
It's super grippy.
It is really grippy, but it is providing some bumpy surface on top of the ice. And also because the kitty litter is a darker color, it's going to help bring a little bit more heat onto the surface of the ice and melt those little bits around it.
And our final one, the
Yeah,
sand.
sand, tried and true. Look at that.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Again, it's connecting to the surface of the ice there and making it a more bumpy surface.
So if you could only have one of these, which would you choose?
I'm leaning towards liking the sand in this for today, in this weather, so that you can have a safe walk, safe commute anywhere you're trying to go.
Sand is actually the most cost-effective and the least likely to create environmental damage, so something.
Yes, and she says the table salt actually, it's not perfect, but it does work. Takes a little while, but it can.
And you need a lot of it.
The vinegar and the cabbage juice.
Where do you get cabbage juice?
I don't know. It's probably kind of stinky too. But the thing is, you got to lay it down before whatever you're using. Lay it down. Like tonight would be perfect, right? Because it's
Before
gonna
the snow actually
Before the snow
comes.
actually is.
Did you lay your salt down?
Yes, and the home office called, and apparently we're out. So I'll be searching for some on the way home.
Oh, well, hopefully it doesn't snow before you get home.
Yeah.
We'll be back in a few minutes with what's making international headlines. 1 week after Iran shot a passenger jet from the sky, Canadian investigators have reached the crash site, though it's unclear how big a role Canada will play in the investigation.
But as Paul Hunter shows us tonight, it's a new video that is proving most revealing. CBC News has not independently verified it, but the New York Times has, and what a story it tells.
The new video is silent, but what's depicted seems clear. The bright light crossing above the horizon appears to be an Iranian missile targeting the passenger jet that had just taken off last week. Invisible for the moment out in what looks like fog. It takes about 20 seconds to find its target, and then the flash. 10 seconds later, a second missile fired the same way. The plane, evidently still in the air, out there somewhere. This time, the missile strikes more quickly. It's closer, a brighter flash. Now, nearly a minute after that, the plane, still flying clearly in flames, begins a rapid, out-of-control plummet. It's at this point this video seems to pick it up from another angle. Evidently shot on cell phone, the plane now falling from the sky in flames. The world knows what happened next. For days now, Iranians have demonstrated in the capital and beyond, angry over what their country's done. Today, unmoved, even with word Iran has now arrested several people involved with the firing of those missiles. It was an unforgivable error, said Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, adding, "We will punish those responsible for the shootdown." Meanwhile, with Donald Trump's fresh sanctions against Iran in place, the U.S. no longer part of the deal limiting Iran's nuclear capabilities, and Iran in turn no longer abiding by aspects of it, today, Britain, France, and Germany triggered a dispute mechanism in the deal aimed at getting Iran back on track, a move Canada supports. But if that effort fails, it threatens the deal altogether. We cannot sit back, said Germany's foreign minister, and watch Iran no longer stick to its commitments. All of it as those protests continue and grow. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
And in reacting to comments from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Republican lawmakers say the U.S. is not to blame for escalating tensions in the Middle East.
As Katie Simpson reports, Trudeau suggested Canadians killed after that Ukrainian plane was shot down would still be alive had the situation in the region not worsened.
A senior Republican congressman is outright rejecting the suggestion the U.S. is in any way responsible for the escalating of tensions in the Middle East and the horrific events that followed. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy was taking questions at a news conference in Washington when he was asked to react to comments made by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau the day before. In a network TV interview on Global News, Trudeau was very careful with his words.
I think if there were no tensions, if there was no escalation recently in the region, those Canadians would be right now home with their families. This is something that happens when you have conflict and war. Innocents bear the brunt of it.
There's no blame here for America. America stood up once again for freedom. Iran went past a red line they had not gone before, killing a U.S. citizen. Iran shot down a commercial, innocent airliner. There's no doubt where the blame lies.
57 Canadians died when that plane was shot down by Iranian missiles. It happened hours after Iran launched more than a dozen missiles at military bases in Iraq, housing U.S. personnel in retaliation for the Trump administration's killing of a top Iranian general. McCarthy wouldn't say whether Canada should have been given a heads up about the attack, which has been a major point of frustration for Canada. But at least one Democratic lawmaker says Ottawa should have been told ahead of time.
We should be working with our allies, and Canada has been historically among the closest of our allies. They send sons and daughters on the ground, spilling blood for causes that we were with arm in arm. And if we're going to be strong and successful, it's working with the coalition.
Canada remains committed to working with the U.S. as its closest security partner. Despite this frustration, sources have told CBC News it will not have an impact on the overall Canada-U.S. relationship. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
And as investigations continue into the crash, those closer to home are remembering loved ones at a candlelight memorial vigil tonight.
Our Tina Lovegreen joins us live from the Civic Plaza in North Vancouver. Tina, it's now been a week since the crash. How are people dealing with the loss?
Well, Anita, Mike, hundreds of people have gathered here at the Civic Center Plaza in North Vancouver to remember those killed on Flight 752. 7 of those people had ties to the North Shore, and a total of 14 people had ties to BC. And, you know, the 7th day vigil is a very important one in Persian culture. They gather on the 3rd day, the 7th day, and again on the 40th day. And grieving together is a very important part of coming over this tragedy for the community. Take a listen to what people told us about the importance of grieving together.
They were a very big part of this community. They've been here. 2 of them, they left behind one beautiful daughter, and the other 2, they were just they've been here for so many years. I can't get into specifics, but for us, it's a big loss.
And so there is counseling available, as you heard, a big loss for the community. So there's counselors available on site for anyone who needs emotional support. There's also a number that the City of North Vancouver has provided for people to call in either English or Farsi, and I would like to share that number with you. It is 236-982-9855. So again, this has been very difficult for the community here, so there is counseling available here, and we are seeing politicians right now from all levels of government here to address this tragedy and come together in this difficult time with the community.
And Tina, just a short time ago, we saw that unverified video of the 2 missiles hitting the aircraft. How are people reacting to those images, those reports tonight?
Simply put, anger. There is anger that there is now reports of a second missile hitting that plane. There's also anger that it took the regime 3 days to come forward and to admit that they were responsible for shooting that plane crash, the plane rather. And here's what one person said to us about that.
I don't take that as a mistake. This is no mistake. You can't make such a mistake like that. And whatever they say is lie. And I think the justice have to bring to Iran. That I'm Persian, but I don't care. If this is murder, this is like crime.
So a lot of anger of the news today that a second missile hit that plane, but there's also hope. There's hope that there will be justice, that there will be accountability, given that the world is watching. Mike, Anita?
All right, Tina, thanks very much. Tina Lovegreen live at the Vigil in North Vancouver tonight.
Well, buses and snow, not always a good match. Stretch buses are especially ill-suited to the snow. TransLink's Kevin Desmond explains why next.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This morning was very rough because of all the rain and then the ice and then the snow on top of it. Some of the conditions were very, very treacherous.
And Metro Vancouver is getting ready for round 2, but the snow from round 1 is still on the ground. There are calls for the province to do more to make sure major highways are cleared this time around.
This would not have happened if the Bank of Montreal had not made the call at all.
Vancouver's mayor is demanding answers, and now the Office of the Police Complaint Commissioner is investigating the detention and arrest of an Indigenous man and his 12-year-old granddaughter. It happened at a Vancouver branch of the Bank of Montreal.
Or I could cooperate with them first to kind of lessen the seriousness of it, to clear my name.
A Burnaby musician falls victim to a CRA scam. She was convinced by phone that police were about to seize her assets in an investigation and ultimately lost $1,500 to a Bitcoin ATM in a Burnaby convenience store. Well, the snowy weather is wreaking havoc on transit in the Lower Mainland, where ridership is up by a quarter in the past 4 years.
Stephen Quinn, host of CBC Radio's The Early Edition, caught up with TransLink CEO Kevin Desmond.
Quinn started by asking Desmond whether the vehicles TransLink has are the right ones for the weather.
It's quite the trade-off, you know, for the 5 or 10 days a year. When it's snowing and when the roads are icy, those 60-foot articulated buses, they don't work very well. They do jackknife. They're pushed from the drivetrain on the back, so they don't work particularly well. But the rest of the 51 or 50 weeks of the year, they service very well because they have a lot of capacity, a much more efficient way to get around. It's a trade-off. I think it's the right trade-off in this part of the world for us to make. But yes, it does undermine our ability to provide good service when it's snowy and icy.
And we see some of those buses replaced on, for instance, heading up to SFU. They'll be replaced with a regular 50-foot bus. Yeah. Do you have enough buses to go around to do that?
No, that's the challenge. I think about a third or a fourth of our fleet are articulated coaches, so there's only so many 40-foot buses that we have to go around. So that shuttle operation you're talking about up Burnaby Mountain for SFU, it's a good operation where we can keep a small handful of 40-foot buses just going up and down the mountain as reliably as possible. But to change out all the Artics, we don't have enough in the spare fleet to do that.
Can we do better, though? I mean, we get the word from TransLink every time we get weather like this. It's like, bundle up, dress warm, be ready for delays. That's the best we can expect from our transit
system. As I said, we're only as good as the streets that we operate on. And we can often be operating quite well. There might be an accident, a spin out in front of us. It delays buses. Buses get bunched. Downstream, people are waiting for a bus that doesn't show up because of other accidents on the road. We do as best as we can. The key is to coordinate as best we can with the jurisdictions to prioritize the snow routes.
When people, get on the SkyTrain at Commercial and Broadway and just jam in, and it's a fiasco when somebody's trying to get off, and is that really a great way for people to start their day? Can we not offer people a more comfortable ride than that?
The good news is next week we're going to start deploying more cars on the Canada line at long last. We added service on the Expo Millennium line in September of last year, and then the next round of adds will be in September. In a mass transit system, in a very, very busy, active, vital urban environment, crowding on transit's a reality. In fact, I'd rather have that problem than empty trains and empty buses. The Canada line was underbuilt. It was not built for, in my view, I can say that, I wasn't here at the time, it was not built for the future. The platforms aren't long enough, the trains aren't long enough, and we've got to deal with that. But I think that is a clarion call for the next round of expansions. We do have to be thinking 20, 30, 50 years in advance. We build these assets for 50-plus year life. Therefore, they need to be built at the capacity for future growth. And I think the Canada line is a good cautionary tale about making sure that we put the assets in a good place for the future.
Well, at 6:41 on this Tuesday evening, a live look at Victoria from the Swans Hotel. Rare snow hitting the capital tonight. Buckle up, plenty more coming our way. Brett breaks down the snow system coming ashore next. Hazardous air quality in Melbourne from bushfire smoke is having an effect on the Australian Open tennis tournament. A 28-year-old Slovenian player suffered breathing difficulties that led to her withdrawal from a qualifying match. Tournament organizers were immediately targeted by critics who say the matches should have been called off given pollution levels. Or was she the only one affected? An Australian player with respiratory distress had to call a medical timeout in his match. The smoke has prompted officials in Victoria State to advise people to stay inside and shut their windows.
The weather update is brought to you by The Body Shop that always takes you back to your happy place. BC's favorite, Craftsman Collision, Air Miles, and Bigger Smiles.
Brett is back, and so's the snow, apparently.
Yes. Doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, we've seen the impacts that we've had on transit, on people just getting around. And I do want to really reiterate, tomorrow morning is still likely to be really quite dicey out there. We are going to be moderating somewhat with our temperatures. But that doesn't mean it's going to be getting much better very quickly. So I do want to spend some time working with you on that forecast, show you what we can expect. But first thing this morning, take a look. This is looking south down. I believe that's Canby, I believe. Double check. I can't be certain here, but certainly the temperatures in the top left-hand corner are indicating that it was a very chilly morning, and in fact, quite likely one of the chilliest that we've seen probably since December in 2008. So with that said, the snow is on everyone's mind right now, and here's a look at where the snow is. You can see largely impacting the southern portions of Vancouver Island and our Gulf Islands, and that's why this area is likely to be getting a little bit more snow than we will. We're going to wait for that band of snow to slowly shift north, and that's going to be happening more so in the overnight period. So watch this. In terms of the timing for our forecast here across the lower mainland, really the most likely chance of getting this heavy snow is going to be at about between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning. However, there are some model discrepancies here. So that means as you're getting going tomorrow, definitely double check what those road conditions are like, because it may be very slow out there. And it's even possible, I can't predict this with any certainty, but maybe even a few school closures could be in effect across the region. Now, you're going to think it's done first thing in the morning, but no, we're going to get into another round in the afternoon, and that could then be followed by even more snow tomorrow night. Now, temperatures, of course, going to be still sufficiently cold for snow to form. And take a look here, southern portions of Vancouver Island, 10 to 20, maybe even 30 centimeters, and across the lower mainland, a very comfortable 5 to 10, probably at least 10 to 15. And after all that is said and done, we are going to get a break eventually from the snow. That will be changing over into rain. Temperatures are going to be moderating. We're going to be getting a next major system coming up from the south, and that means, in classic Saturday fashion, looking at a pretty rainy day as of right now and lasting into the weekend. So if you haven't enjoyed the cold, you are going to get a bit of a reprieve, and if you've been enjoying the snow, continue to do so tomorrow. Temperatures still not expecting to be going up much above freezing. Thursday, Friday, we're going to go back into that rain-snow mix pattern, and then, as I mentioned, come Saturday and Sunday, we'll return to that warmth, but of course, it's going to come with a little bit of rain at the same time.
All right, thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
Well, Meghan Markle visited the downtown east side of Vancouver today, and news that the Royals are planning to move to Canada part-time has created quite a stir on Vancouver Island. That's where Meghan and Harry spent the Christmas holidays. We'll find out what locals think about a more permanent move next.
Well, we've just learned Meghan Markle paid a visit to the downtown Eastside Women's Centre today. The Duchess of Sussex had tea with the staff to discuss issues affecting women in the community. The downtown Eastside Women's Centre has been providing a safe space for women and children since 1978. Markle was seen boarding a seaplane in Victoria today before making an appearance in Vancouver. She and her husband, Prince Harry, recently announced they will split their time between Canada and the UK.
A lot of speculation about where they might end up, but could they actually be calling the West Coast home?
Here's Tanya Fletcher with what royal life could look like in Victoria.
The bells chime 3 o'clock in Victoria, otherwise known as tea time for some. And in the city named after one queen, the grandson of another could make his home.
If Prince Harry is lonely for a good cup of tea or to see a pack of corgis in the park, probably Victoria is as good a place as any in Canada.
Especially after the Duke and Duchess of Sussex spent their Christmas here, and where Meghan is believed to have been since returning to Canada last week. Their move met with support here.
They're going to be able to live their own lives.
And delight.
I'd hug her. If I'd ask. Yeah. I'd ask first. I'd ask.
Very polite, very Canadian of you.
Thank you.
What would you do?
I'd be excited and hug her also and get a picture.
For others, simply a shrug.
Oh, that's fine.
We'll give them lots of space.
And why is that?
Because that's what they want.
This could be a defining moment in the evolution of the Canadian crown.
A defining moment that comes with high expectations from royal watchers.
Even if he's only a part-time royal, that Prince Harry will be there and help us celebrate some of our future milestones a little more readily than a monarch who's in her 90s and living overseas.
It's still not clear where exactly in Canada they'll choose to live or who will cover what costs. Security for the Duke and Duchess is pegged at nearly $2 million a year, and already there's a petition arguing that Canadians should not have to foot the bill. For others, though, the international attention is priceless.
There's been an ongoing story arc, which has been quite an interesting phenomenon.
The tourism industry certainly welcomes the publicity, as long as it's classy.
Capitalizing on royals in general is just tacky, and we want to stay away from that.
Many decisions still to be made, but until details are finalized, what would be your message to them?
I think anybody is very welcome in our community.
Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Victoria.
At least 59 people have died in avalanches in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir over the last 24 hours, but 50 others were somehow found and dug out after being buried in snow. Harsh winter weather is a typical feature in the region, but in recent days, heavy rains have contributed to multiple avalanches and landslides. In the neighboring India-controlled Kashmir, at least 10 people were killed. Survivors have been airlifted away from the area for medical treatment. Authorities say many villagers are stranded and homes have been destroyed. Key highways further southwest have been blocked by snowfall, forcing the suspension of transportation of essential goods.
Well, for a third straight day, clouds of ash and fountains of lava gushed from the crater of a volcano about 70 kilometers south of Manila. Nearly 40,000 people left the area around the volcano after being warned of a possible explosive eruption at any time. Hundreds took shelter at one evacuation center. Thousands of others have refused to leave or have come back. Well, there were once hundreds of Zellers stores across the country, but the final 2 will close by the end of the month. We meet one former employee who has a passion for the former low-cost retailer.
In 2018, an arrest was made that put Canada into the middle of a trade war between the United States and China. I'm Stephen Quinn, the host of the CBC Vancouver original podcast Sanctioned, the Arrest of a Telecom Giant. The extradition hearing of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou begins on January 20th. Stay on top of the story with new episodes of Sanctioned out now. Make sure you're subscribed to Sanctioned on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, the lowest price may be the law, but not for much longer. The last 2 Zellers stores, both in Ontario, will close later this month.
Yeah, there's still 2 left. And our colleagues at CBC Toronto caught up with former employees who have cherished memories and memorabilia.
My name is Richard Hall. I worked for Zellers from 1978 right through to its close in 2013. And I'm privileged to be able to share some of my stories and a little bit of memorabilia that I kept throughout my years today. Our very first store in the company, Walter P. Zeller, in 1931 opened Store 1 in London, Ontario. So that's the root of our company. This is the actual newspaper from, forgive me, May 8th, 1945, where Zellers has taken out an ad, all hail to the glorious day of victory from the Second World War. This is a toy that I dug out of my son's room, hoping that he had kept it. Probably one of my most favorite slogans of Zellers was because the lowest price is the law. And you know, it was a real keepsake. Toyland was huge for Zellers. It was one of our biggest marketing events of the year is when we launched Toyland for Christmas. The law of Toyland for the staff and the toy department to wear. It was always a lot of fun. Second biggest highlight of my career at Zellers. Gordie Howe was doing a book tour. I spent the next 3 days with Gordie, touring him around, taking him and his wife to all of the sports outlets for his PR tour. And the fun part of the story, we were done a little bit early, and Gordie said, well, didn't you just have a baby? And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I did. He says, well, let's go see him. So, can you imagine, unexpectedly, we walk in and there's Gordie Howe and his wife. And so this is one of my prized possessions for my oldest son, Colton, is a picture of Gordie holding my son.
Wow.
It's got quite the collection of stuff.
Big collection, big Zellers fan.
And there's the reality of retail. Zellers is no more.
Gone with Sears. All right, you can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC, and Dan is here at 11 after the National.
Yeah, we're going to leave you tonight with a break from the snow. Check this out, a family of bears capturing people's attention as they climb into trees. Apparently they're hibernating there for the winter in the Comox Valley. Have a good sleep. Night.